Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to week 13 of HomeGames. It is lovely to see you here once again. Here from the basement, not actually from the queue at Primark, though I imagine some of you are actually watching this from the queue at Primark. I hope your leisure wear purchasing journey is going well. Up here in Scotland, of course, we can't purchase sportswear at this point in time, which for most Scottish people is absolutely no hardship whatsoever. It is lovely to see so many of you on, and good to have lots of you back and some first timers as well. I see some names on the thing that I don't recognise and some that I definitely do. So thank you all for being here. My guest this week is the amazing Kat Mock, which I think is that side as we look. Hello, Kat. Say something funny.
Oh, I'm not funny. That's not what I do.
See, she's funny already. Kat runs a great business called Unity Paraplanning, and we're going to get into talking about replacement business and DB transfers and all that kind of stuff. So a little bit different to a couple of the other weeks that we've had recently, but I'm really looking forward to getting into a kind of proper planning subject and all that kind of stuff. So I hope that will work for you all. A little bit of housekeeping. I will make it really brief, I promise. As ever, if any of you are having any stuttering, not stuttering with me being like inarticulate, but audio and visual stuff, try that link that I just posted in comments, and that will usually sort your feed out for you. It works about 90% of the time. The other 10% of the time, switch off and come back in, and that'll sort it out. In terms of chat, that's going to stay open. I'll watch the chat while we're talking with Kat, but please do ask questions as well down the bottom. There's an ask a question button there. Somebody says hi from India. Hello, person from India, nice to have you. I think it's the very first person from India we've had, so that's lovely. If you want to watch this back later on or watch any of the previous home games, we've got them all up on a YouTube channel now, and there's a green button at the bottom of your screen. You can find them all there. If you need to tune out during this one, this will get posted up just a few minutes after it finishes on the YouTube channel. The only other thing to say is that we ran a survey last week for people who've been coming to home games, and lots of you answered, and that was really, really nice of you. Thank you very much. We asked if we should keep home games going even though lockdown is at various speeds in various places, starting to lift a little bit, and some people aren't at home quite so much, and something like 96% or 97% of people said yes, we should. Damn you all, because they're really time consuming to set up. But okay, we will definitely keep doing them. For now, we'll keep them weekly. I think we might go a little bit less frequently in the fullness of time. Hope that link is not a Scotland Footy t-shirt. It's not, mate, it's not. One of the things that quite a lot of people said was that having the half-hour thing and then the break and the home games bit, that had run its course. You didn't enjoy that so much now, and that we were losing a little bit of keeping the conversation going with the guests, because the guests we have are awesome, as you know, and Kat will be the same. This is going to be the last one then when we do it in that format, just because we're used to it. From next week, and we've got Chris Budd on next week doing his Institute of Financial Wellbeing stuff, we'll just do 45, and because we've got the YouTube thing now, it's dead easy to watch them back. So if you need to go at a half-hour point, off you go, and you can watch it back later on. So I hope that will work for everybody. T-shirt of the week this week is a second t-shirt. Actually got two of these from Sabbath, 80s pagan metal stalwarts from somewhere, Market Town in England. I really don't know exactly where they're from, but they're always from market towns in England. And this from Sabbath's first record, History of a Time to Come. And really, if you're into your thrash milestones, you really do want to check out that. Kate, he probably could come the week after as well, to be honest. I think if we let Chris on, it's very hard to get back off again. So you might just find that if you tune in at any point, he will still be talking. Oh, and on that point, I owe everybody an apology. Kat and I were doing a little bit of a check and a tech test yesterday, and my computer froze up for some reason. And when I came back in, I set the whole session to live as we're doing now. So you all got a thing saying, hey, it's going live, and many messages of consternation. So I'm sorry about that. It's just me being shit. That's what happened there. So there we are. Right, what I'm going to do, this is one of the weeks where we have a little bit of research which I'm going to share with you, which has to do with what we're going to talk about with Kat. So I'll do that just for a second, and then we'll get into our chat properly. And here we go. I'm going to share that now, and I will focus in on it as well. So Kat and I will go quite small down the bottom of the screen there. And here we go. So yeah, this was from the big survey, as you know, often is that I share from these things. About 400 firms in November. Yeah, you did get the right day, Sean. From November, 400 and odd firms, and we asked a bunch of questions about DB actually, and any of you that were participants in the survey would have seen this get played back. But we did ask firms whether you were doing more or fewer DB transfers, and here's what people said. Now, we didn't know about the contingent charging ban at this point in time, and we didn't know about having to consider things like the default workplace alternatives and that kind of stuff. So PS 2006 was, we kind of knew something was coming, right? But we didn't know what it would be. So here we go. Only 5% of firms said they were doing more DB transfers. It's pretty interesting. About a quarter just don't do them anyway. So that's kind of interesting. So these are mainly, the people that fill out our surveys are mainly directly authorized firms. Usually, though I say it myself, we do it, get a good quality of firm responding to our stuff. Obviously, present company accepted for any of you on the call. So I kind of surprised it was that many, but fair play. A quarter still doing the same, just hadn't made any changes, and the rest, about a third, either doing a lot less or just a bit less in the way of DB work. And an interesting little comment. We'd like to do them, and we think we can, and we've got the knowledge, but we're just so scared of going near them in case PI rockets or is withdrawn. So there you go. There's just a little bit of context about what some folk are thinking. So I will get rid of that for the moment, and we'll come into Kat. So right, let's get going, Kat. First of all, how's tricks? How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, it's good. It's been intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, really good. We're getting on really well. So yeah, not too bad.
Excellent. And I think quite a lot of people will know you already. But for those that this is their first Kat experience, tell us a little bit about Unity and what you get up to.
So Unity Paraplanning have been going since April last year, and we're out working with maybe 10 to 15 planning firms. And doing all kinds of things. So yeah, we get involved in recommendations, we get involved in helping with process and CIP, and just generally being a good sounding board for our clients, really.
Excellent.
So,
and open for new firms that might be looking for help?
We are indeed, yeah.
Good, that's the punting done. Now we can move on. So we're going to talk about replacement business and about DB and stuff. And I guess, yeah, I mean, you don't get to choose, do you? It's, whatever the firms have got ready for you, that's what you're going to do. So, we're seeing some of the changes there. Have you seen, not necessarily just through lockdown, but have you seen through this year, any changes in what people are throwing at you and what they've got ready to get you to look at?
Yeah, massively. So when lockdown hit, new business just fell through the floor. So we had a quiet couple of weeks of nothing or not much, and then the types of work we're seeing are vastly different to what we had before. So we've got more reviews, we've got more process-driven stuff, a lot of existing client work. And then I think there's just been this, everyone's been emptying their drawers of the most technical stuff that they've had, that they've been hiding and deferring. And they've gone, oh, okay, well, we're at home now. We might as well open that up and give it to Kat. So yeah, so it's been a lot.
So does that have to do with replacement business and consolidation of assets, or is it just old calculations and stuff that folk haven't been getting near?
Bit of everything. So it would be a case of like really ridiculous lifetime allowance calculations, or working out how a DB scheme works to put in a cash flow. And then with replacement analysis, it's looking at the more complicated existing schemes and what they mean, and and really analysing what they're worth before they can actually make a decision about whether they'd want to or not entertain the idea of switching it.
Yeah. And have you got a sense from firms that you're working with whether the kind of stuff that you're feeling, and you were quiet for a few weeks there, is that reflected with them? Have new business is a funny term, isn't it? Additional investment harder to get at the moment, or people kind of finding things a bit freer now?
I think the general consensus is that that's still slow, but people are finding different things to talk about and different ways of getting things done, and it's just basically moved the goalpost a little bit as to what they're looking at and how they're talking to people. I think generally, I think it's improving relationships with clients and making them a lot deeper and a lot firmer.
That's kind of interesting. So if you can't go hunting after a sexy new client, you kind of love the one you're with a little bit more, which I guess is a good thing in lots of ways. I was talking to the kind of first firm actually earlier this week who said that they were having no problem signing new clients up at all. Most firms I've spoken to over the last 3 months have been saying, well, kind of a bit like that. So we are prospecting. We're prospect for referrals or family members and that kind of stuff, and maybe deepening a little bit in the way that you're talking about with some of the harder work. But as for getting new clients through the door that we haven't met before and getting them ready to invest, that's a bit brutal. And actually, a chap I was speaking to said that he'd had clients he'd met last year where they'd kind of decided together that the time wasn't right to invest, but actually coming back with the kind of markets having dipped and saying, if you were holding off because you were worried about that, here you go, things are off 20% or whatever, when they were. I was that. So I don't know. That feels unusual though, right? It doesn't sound like something you've...
Yeah, it's not really something that I've seen a lot of. I think a lot of firms have really struggled with the idea of timing the market, because lots of firms don't like the idea of timing the market, but then this happens and then they question everything about their process. So I think that's why I've had so much more sort of process and CIP work, because people have looked at it and gone, right, well, I didn't really think this would happen, so does it work? And if it doesn't, what do we do for the next time? That can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, I might come back to that actually. That's really interesting about the CIP stuff and how kind of plugged in it is now to the hearts of these businesses. But we're going to talk about DB and replacement. So we've got a nice new DB paper to play with, which is good. And I know you've got far too much of a life to have poured over every paragraph of it. But you might tell us at least what, somebody that does the technical end of this, because you do DB work, don't you?
Yes, I have been known to in the past.
And you love it, don't you? I mean, I do love it.
Is
fun for you.
It's
that's weird. That is a bit weird.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
My most exciting thing about the whole paper was the CPD requirement. I was like, CPD.
How much do you get for that?
Just the satisfaction of having done more CPD.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, can you? I don't know this actually. Can you, when you're spending 3 hours reading that, can you just mark it as 3 hours unstructured? Can you just do that?
So you can. You've got a certain amount of unstructured, but you need the structured stuff to actually get where you need to get to. So you need some external provider stuff. You need some, learning objectives and reflective statements to say what you actually did learn, rather than just sort of, I'm going to read something for a little while and take my time over it, maybe read it a few times, put down 6 hours. You can't really do that.
Christina says she read the whole statement because she is that sad. I think we're all grading on a curve, right, on a call like this. I think, all of us have got some fairly deep issues when we're getting to this. But what did you take from it? What's your feeling about the issues that it raised?
It wasn't a massive surprise, or there was nothing in there that I thought, that I wasn't expecting. I think the workplace pension scheme requirement is a headline, but actually, if you really think about it, it's something we probably have all been thinking about anyway as part of the process. It's just formalizing it and making sure that actually we're demonstrating that we're looking at these things and we're not just playing lip service to it. Which you can, it's really obvious when that's happening, really, really clear, especially when I'm reviewing a case as a kind of external person. You ask a couple of questions and you think, oh, okay, but that hasn't really been thought about.
Yeah.
So I think that for most players in this market, they're going to be pretty prepared for this stuff because they're already drilling down massively on objectives. They're already getting the information that you need to be able to really justify this kind of case, or on the head quite sharpish. So I think that most people will navigate it fine, and the people that wouldn't probably have already gone.
That's interesting. And there's Andy saying he asks that workplace stuff all the time anyway. Yeah, Christina, I agree, actually. There's lots of stuff that's relevant in there and potential for read across. So with contingent charging ban, based on the firms that you've seen you work with and just what you know from ages of being out and about there, how serious is that, do you think, as an issue, or is it just hyped in the trade press?
I think it is a serious issue, but I think that it's been talked about and debated for long enough that most people should be going in that direction anyway, because the writing was on the wall. So I think it is important and it's a very good step, but I think the regulation needs to be the guidance really needs to be read properly to make sure that you're not just changing your kind of words a little bit to sort of fit it, because they've got specific examples of actually, no, this isn't okay. So I think like implementation fees, there was a line about that. So I think that really needs to be read through and reviewed. But it can only be a good thing.
That's fair enough. And you're not too worried that a lot of cases that would come across your desk that they would get choked off and people wouldn't get the right advice as a result?
Not as a result of that. But I've just heard my door go, so if my dog starts barking, I apologize. But I do think the whole sort of DB universe and how it's being talked about makes me a bit frightened that it's going to scare advisors off from giving good advice where it is appropriate. Because I mean, the cases that I've looked at, I challenge quite strongly on these cases. But the cases I'm looking at are suitable, and I'd like to think that there is still a place for giving that advice where it is suitable, and that doesn't get choked off.
And what sort of things make a case look suitable for you in that? Is it particular objectives for the client, or is it the maths, or what makes it? Because there's definitely that hardening was like, assume it's unsuitable and you're really, really going to have to reach to get to the other bit. What makes it feel right to you?
I think the first thing, making sure the essential expenditure is covered with secure income. So making sure that, one big red flag for me is if that DB is the only thing you've got and you're looking to take it and make it more risky, that's a bit scary. But where you've got a hell of a lot of other stuff going on, and actually this is a tiny bit of your overall plan, that's where it often sits a bit more comfortably. There's a list in the original guidance of places where you would look at it, but it's case by case, and you absolutely 100% need to have very, very clear objectives that you know are going to be met and demonstrated throughout the cash flow in the APTA.
And that's a objectives thing is interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like there's a real focus. The Mike's talked about before, I think in the early days of this, the assessing suitability review, which is going to go back to next year. But a lot of it, I think, is about real objectives as opposed to cookie cutter stuff. So how good I mean, obviously all your firms are excellent because they've been well coached by you, but do you think as an industry we're getting that stuff right?
It's, for me, I still think it's very polarized. And there are still, this has been talked about for years and years and years. This has been talked about since I started paraplanning. And it's such an easy thing to forget that actually this is the key. But I think in more recent years, it's more about the needs and the wants and comparing those two when you're looking at objectives. So you can't just say the client wants all of these things, and the only way you can do that is via a DB transfer or a pension switch, when actually you're not really highlighting what they actually need. But we had a case the other day where this client wanted to take this lump sum out, and they needed, there were about $3,000 of the lump sum was a need. They absolutely needed that. Whereas the rest of it was a sort of, it'd be nice to go and buy a caravan or whatever it was. It was and it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth putting yourself at that risk for that. So we ended up saying, actually, we think you should do these needs, and then just let's just hold off on that, review things, and keep things a bit more safe. And that, I think, is where you get good advice, where you're actually looking at, I hear what you want, but I also have one eye on what you need. Yeah.
That's right. And Mike, colleague Mike, saying the client wants access to our investment proposition is his favourite objective. And I genuinely remember seeing a great suitability letter, it was many, many pages long. It said, your requirement is for a diversified multi-asset portfolio with a 19.6% minimum weighting to commercial property and a quarterly rebalanced whatever else. And I feel it was like, ding, look at my suitability letter, and it was bollocks, right? It was just sheer bollocks. But there is something there about this kind of interplay of your objectives fitting to what it is that the advisor does and the tail wagging the dog. So how pure can you be about this stuff? Because there has to be a bit in there that's an audit trail that says, we've kind of talked about the investment bit and you're happy with what we've got, so I've framed it as an objective for you. How evil is something like that?
I don't think that should be in there. Objectives are your whys. Objectives are what it's all for. It's not a feature. It's not a proposition. It's why you're there. We tend to split out objectives, so because there's certain things that you do want to say, like, an advisor will want to put you in something that's appropriate for your risk profile, but a client is never going to come to you and say, I'd like to invest in line with my risk profile, please. They're not going to do that. That's not, it is also appropriate. And often a client's not necessarily going to say, I'd like to invest in the lowest cost but best value thing. So we split our objectives into, this is what the client wants and needs are. And this is, as your planners, our objectives, when we're looking to meet those needs, our objectives are these. So those things will be, we want to keep things as simple as possible for you. We want to make sure the costs are low, but you're getting the value that you need, that kind of stuff. So we're positioning that from the perspective of the planner, because they do have objectives when they come to make advice, but keeping the client's stuff to what they actually want, rather than just trying to shoehorn all your stuff in it.
And shoehorning's a big one, isn't it? And that's someone mentioned, it was Scott, wasn't it? It said the wee kick from the paper was the ongoing reviews and who really needs them. And kind of allied to that is I guess it's a core part of replacement business, and it always has been, which is most advisors only get paid when a client moves money into the kind of care of that advisor. So replacement business has always had conflicts in it. So how do you help firms that are highly motivated to gather assets to not gather assets? If that's all right, can you even do that?
I think you can. I think it's having the kind of relationship where you can do that. And when I meet clients for the first time and position our service, I'll always say, we will challenge you on things where we think actually there might be a different way, or where we're not understanding really how you've come to something. We need to understand that to write the report. And so all of our clients know that they're going to get that. And if you've met me, you know I'm challenging. It's going to happen. I'm going to ask you questions. And a lot of the time it's just so that I get it, so that I can actually do the job that you need me to do. So I've got quite a lot of freedom with most of my firms to do the review part, stop, have a conversation and say, right, okay, well, I'm looking at this. Were you aware of these things? In my view, this bit's great, this bit's not great. Should we have a think about what to do? And that usually is how we end up getting to where we end up. I've very rarely had a conversation with a firm where I've looked at something and gone, actually, this isn't right, and highlighted it, and they've gone, no, just do it. In fact, I don't think that's actually happened while I've been at Unity. It's certainly happened to me in my previous roles, but most planners want that. Most planners want to be told those things so that they can give the best advice.
Yeah. I think that, you kind of hope that's right. I remember, I think you were at that conference, actually. It was a PFS Paraplanning conference in Birmingham. I think it was Birmingham some years ago. And I banged on or whatever. And I was wandering around looking for free things from stands, harvesting pens or whatever shit you do at these conferences. And this young guy came up, and he'd just been in that situation where he was employed, but he challenged up and been told, just do it. And he's like, what do I do? And it's like, wow, that's super tough, right? Because you've got, your professional integrity to worry about and your future to worry about. And if you become known as somebody that just puts it through, that's kind of really weird. And time is absolutely galloping away with us. We're nearly done our half hour. I want to start something with you, and then we'll kind of pause for a second, and then we'll come back to it. We started about centralized investment propositions and that kind of stuff, and we talked about yesterday about this, didn't we? But that's so emotional now for lots of firms that if you start saying, actually, do you know what, the workplace scheme actually is all right, maybe that client for that one should just do that. That must be hard for advisors to swallow, right?
Yes, very much, very much. I think it's very hard when you put your heart and soul into creating a CIP, because they're hard. It's really hard to get out all of that, kind of all of your philosophy and all of your whys and how you've got there, and then to look at it and go, oh, let's not do that. Let's not do that. But I think most firms, it comes back to the challenge thing. They need to have some kind of function within their firm, whether it's their paraplanner, whether it's their compliance, whether it's somebody external that can come in and look at things on a slightly dispassionate basis and actually take that link away, so that actually you can have constructive conversations about when it is and isn't appropriate. But I did think that as I was reviewing all of this stuff, that actually it's really important to review your replacement analysis process whilst you're writing your KIP, because
that's interesting.
If you haven't really thought that through, then you can't really plan for outliers. You can't really plan for when do we keep, when do we move, what's our criteria. And actually, I think that would make a really valuable part of a CIP, is actually thinking about those things.
That's really interesting. Listen, that's us pretty much at 1 o'clock, everybody. So those of you that are going to disappear at 1, you need to disappear. I'll just mention very briefly once again, next week is Chris Budd. So do come back there. I did have an awesome parrot joke to share with you, but I think we'll just keep talking instead, because according to the survey, only 38.6% of you like dad jokes. So we won't do that. Every week I make no apologies for this. If you are lucky enough to be employed, gainfully employed, you feel charitable and you have a quid in your pocket and you can share it, you could do a lot worse and give it to our house charity is Samaritans. We know that those guys are doing astonishing work for people in difficult circumstances. So if you feel able to share a little bit of what the industry has given to you, then please do it with Samaritans. Failing that, have a brilliant week, and we will see you next week, unless you're coming on to a demo for Platform Analyzer tomorrow, in which case we'll see you for that. But thank you to all the 1 o'clockers. and we'll just keep talking cat, I think, for a few minutes. And anybody that wants to ask cat stuff as well, there's lots of furious agreement going on. As if you ever seen Stuart Lee do it's like, was it funny? I said, no, but I agreed out of it. That's kind of what's going on today. But let's get into KIP stuff a little bit more, right? So you've got to objectively say, this is suitable for that client, right? And potentially more suitable than what you're in. And I see lots and lots of KIPs come across the desk with the work that we do with firms in terms of the kind of building the technology propositions that the stack that they're working with and all that kind of thing. So we always look at what this stuff is. And a lot of the advisory models and so on, I mean, there's a lot in them. And, you know, I've bought in asset allocation services from wherever I've bought them in from, and then I've bought the Rayner Spencer Mills list or the Morningstar list or the FE list or whatever list it is that I've bought in, and here's a set of portfolios, and I guess I got my name on them, so I feel good. But I notice in those circumstances the cost chain can get pretty heavy that the client's bearing, and that must make your life really tricky in those circumstances. So how do you work with that? Because the IFA presumably isn't going to go, do you know what, Kat? Bang on, you're right. Vanguard Life Strategy. That's what we'll do. Yeah. Things that don't happen, right?
Most firms that I've worked with and we've worked together on the CIP, these are the sort of things that actually are highlighting all the way through. It's like, actually, it's great to have these amazing things when it's appropriate, but we need to really think about what happens when you've got a cost-sensitive client. What happens when actually what you've got that's existing is all right? You know, is there a call sometimes for having two streams to say, you know, actually, let's do our CIP for this portion, and then this portion can be for something else, and, you know, it's all right. And having thought about that at that stage kind of knocks off those issues. In the cases where we've had it and we look at it and we go, okay, well, you're going to take the charges from this to this if you do your CIP, then we've gone back and we've really challenged it and said, okay, well, there are other options. This could be a call for either an internal switch or a lower cost standalone product, which most firms actually have like a suite of that. They're the go-to. So the go-to for kids, the go-to for transactional people, and it's important to have that, because if you don't have that and you've got nowhere to go, then you're just constantly trying to justify ridiculous charges.
Yeah, and I come back to the potential read across for ongoing advisor charges and just kind of amping up the kind of charge load. And obviously it's great if you're the firm and it's relatively passive income, I suppose. But is it? I mean, how often are you having to get involved with kind of this sounds worse than I mean it, right? But justification of ongoing charges, like, I'm charging this lot 1% a year, we better show that we've done something.
It is fairly frequent, but usually with the clients that we're working with, the actual ongoing service is way more than just checking that it's suitable once a year and doing a rebalance. The service that they're actually giving is, you know, we're looking at your overall everything financial plan. We're doing your cash flow. We're looking at your business. We're looking at everything. And that is really important. And I think that there's a difference between, you know, offering just a kind of, you know, an off the cuff ongoing service for a lot of money.
Yeah.
To actually having a real tangible ongoing relationship where you know from start to finish what your aims and goals are. And I think that we almost need that to be separated in some way.
Yeah.
Difference between financial planning, ongoing fees, and just, you know, just checking it's okay and, you know, doing the very bare minimum. But it's rare that we have firms that are doing the bare minimum for the client.
And does that mean you would be encouraging firms to, I don't know, kind of readdress their service propositions so they've got a younger client, or so not that young, right? A 35 or 40-year-old that makes their way there, so decades to do whatever they're doing. what's the justification for a kind of big CIP model portfolio or something, as opposed to sticking in a default scheme or something like that?
Often, well, and this is only my experience, so it could be vastly different across the board, but often I'm finding that that's already been thought about by the time it gets to me. So they've already said ongoing advice isn't that important. There's a massively long term. Let's research something that actually we put them in and let it go. So, you know, sometimes, I dread to say it, sometimes lifestyling is all right. And sometimes put them in.
There's a subject.
But sometimes it is all right for X number of years until you review it again. You don't need an ongoing service between years 1 and 20, but maybe come back to me 5 years before or 10 years before, and we can start thinking about what you're actually, because you don't know what you're going to need by that, you know, when you're 25, you don't know. So I think often it is already thought about and baked in to the advice. At least that's what I'm seeing. You know, there are options, and I'm not seeing a great deal of shoehorning into CIPs, apart from where there's like a family group, and then often that's being reflected on the other side with the fees. So things not having advice fees on them. So if you're taking advantage of a family linking the charges situation and putting it in a kit, actually they're not charging on it.
No, that makes sense. And just looking at the comments as you're talking there, it's great to see people using the comments bit for their own marketing. That's fine, Paul. You should I'll invoice you later. So that was really nice. Do you think that we'll see the split that I think the FCA are kind of going at here about ongoing advisor charges, which are to do with financial planning, as opposed to kind of big, heavy 0.81% ongoing charges for advice, regulated advice and suitability and that kind of stuff?
I definitely think that is something that should be looked at and considered, because it's massively important. And I think it's very difficult for a client to understand those distinctions.
Yeah.
So they might talk to one firm and expect the same service from another firm where it's actually massively different. And it's all kind of big words like financial planning and holistic and this and that. It doesn't mean anything. But actually separating that out and actually having two streams, which says, okay, well, this is what you can expect, and you can expect to pay this, or this is what you can expect, and actually that costs you a little bit more. Having those different propositions, or at least saying we only do this. So if you're not that type of client, then you're not our type of client.
Yeah.
There needs to be enough confidence to be able to do that.
And are you seeing, I'm sorry, but we've lasted, 38 minutes before getting the word prod in. Do you see firms starting to think about segmenting out those propositions more, or do you have to kick them to do that?
Oh, no, that's definitely happening. Often we have to ask questions around it, or maybe help filter it down a little bit. But it is definitely happening. It's definitely in people's minds. And often they just come to us and say, right, okay, well, I know about it and I've kind of segmented, but is this okay? Does it work? And then we just sort of tidy it up and ask questions about it, and give, you know, what about this situation? What about that? Is that a segment or is that an outlier? So we just see it like that, I think.
That's funny. The same guy I was talking about earlier, he was on chatting about segmentation. I will send him your way. And but he was divvying up into 4 groups or something, and life stage stuff, as opposed to portfolio value, which he'd always done. And we had a long conversation about exactly that. You call them outliers, I call them awkward buggers. Folk that just don't fit. And what are you going to do for those people? And it feels like that's quite useful to have that bucket, but lots of segmentations haven't done that. So that kind of something standard you would encourage people to do. Awkward squad.
Definitely. I think when you're thinking of what you can do, you should always think about when it doesn't work, because, you know, as soon as somebody asks you a question that's outside of your normal sort of nice little comfort area, you suddenly go, oh, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So preparing for that in advance. And I think we're, as an outsourcer, you kind of because we deal with so many different types of firm and so many different types of work, we can quite easily give you a list of 10 and say, well, what about this? And what about when this happens, where would you put them? And then you just get a feel from the planner whether it is actually a segment that they've just missed, or they just need to have a process. Process could be as easy as we do whole of market research where you don't fit in these, or you could say we do whole of market research which gets us to this kind of panel or this zone, and then we look at it based on that. So it depends on how frequent they're going to see these outliers as to how much they want to put it in their COP, I think.
Yeah. I've maybe got one more thing to ask, and then I think we've probably impinged on your day enough, because Kat is on holiday this week, right? And she's doing this despite being on holiday. So feel very humbled. Were you doing that? But you said something yesterday I thought was really interesting. More than one. I mean, you said lots of things yesterday I thought were interesting. Like, Mark, what have you done to the technology? And that kind of stuff. But you were talking about advisors being overcautious, because almost everything I've asked you about is advisors being too gung-ho. Wanting to push business through, but you were saying actually quite often it's the other way around.
Sometimes it's the other way around. I think this is why having a good replacement process is really important, because sometimes you can look at something and say it's got a guarantee, or it's got a GAR, or it's got something that sounds really special and amazing, and it gets looked at and no, can't do anything with it. That's it. Just leave it where it is, regardless of whether it's suitable or not. Whereas actually, this is why replacement analysis takes time, because you do have to look at it and go, okay, right, yes, there's a guarantee. Yes, there's a benefit we need to look at, but actually, is it worth it for this client? Do they specifically need it? Is it something that's worth keeping now, but looking at later? So it might not be worth moving it now because it's got 4% guaranteed growth rate, but actually later on at this point, it would be worth it. Or you might have a guarantee that applies to 5% of the fund, and actually, you need to look at the value of the guarantee and actually do the research. And I think sometimes, very occasionally, people get frightened by the words and just go, nah, it's too scary. Let's not do that.
Presumably they're frightened by the compliance police.
Yeah.
Just having to go through the pain of justifying it.
Yeah.
But there must be people as a result of this that are getting, I don't know, not say less suitable advice, but like poorer outcome than they might if the advisor's just going, hell no, I'm going nowhere near it.
I this is exactly the same point as I have with the DB stuff. I don't think that a planner should ever be in a position where they're too frightened of regulation and compliance to be able to give fully suitable advice and really think on things. And actually, each client is different. Each objective is different. There are themes and there are common things you need to look at, but actually, does it apply here? And if you don't do that because you're too scared or you're too strict, then I think that there will be poorer client outcomes.
Cool. Listen, I think we're at our time, and I'll round up by saying this, which is, and I'll say it so you don't have to, Kat. So there's a couple, Kate and Simon, saying they're trying to rewrite fee propositions, maybe getting away from percentage based, and Simon says it's like catching fog, and all this stuff. I reckon it must be really, really hard to question yourself in this kind of way. So I suspect having somebody external that can kick your ass a little bit about your thinking, but obviously in a fun, happy way, has got to be a good plan, right? That's, and I guess that's why you do what you do.
Yeah.
So right, let's call it there. Thank you so much, Kat. That's amazing, and thank you for taking the time. And it's such a thorny area, right? So I love hearing from actual practitioners that are doing it. Thank you all for staying on. There's lots of you stayed for the whole thing. So as ever, we're hugely appreciative. HomeGames will be back at 12:30 next week with Chris Budd. Until then, thank you all very much. Thanks one more time to Kat, and Langcat out.